So, first policy up is draft policy 2017-4, remove reciprocity requirement for inter-RIR transfers. Rob Seastrom is the AC member. Come on up, Rob. Okay. Green goes forward, red goes back.
Okay.
When you hit green, you'll see a little green light light up.
Which one?
See?
Ah, I see. Okay, great. Thank you.
That way you know your click's been clicked.
Wow, my cheat sheet is hard to find. That's hard. It's off in the distance. So, 2017-4, AFRINIC and APNIC, AFRINIC and LACNIC are considering one-way inter-RIR transfer policies. AFRINIC reached out to ARIN staff and asked, hey, will 8.4 policy language allow this to work? And the answer was no. So there's some concerns that we have overall, which is the ARIN should recognize that other RIR operators have different needs and different requirements in their region than we do. Pardon me. And AFRINIC and LACNIC operators have a need to acquire space. They have reasons that they think are important to not allow two-way transfers. And they have orders of magnitude less space than we have here in the ARIN region. So the policy statement is, add the following sentence after the first sentence of NRPM 8.4, inter-RIR transfers may take place to an RIR with non-reciprocal inter-RIR transfer policy only when the recipient RIR has an IPv4 total inventory less than the average, the arithmetic mean, of the IPv4 total inventory among all of the RIRs. So who is that? Well, did the math. And if you take a look, it turns out that LACNIC and AFRINIC are the two RIRs that have less than the average amount of addresses. We sent this to ARIN for, staff and legal for comment. ARIN staff says consider changing the word remove. That's good feedback. And that the way that they will implement it is that quarterly they will compute the average of the total inventory and post that online. This policy would be implemented to work only with RIRs that have a unidirectional, compatible, needs-based inter-RIR transfer policy. To eliminate any possible confusion, they recommended that with a non-reciprocal inter-RIR transfer policy, which is kind of cumbersome, would be better phrased as unidirectional, compatible, needs-based inter-RIR transfer policy. They sent us some more comments. A corollary recommendation is to change 8.4 of the NRPM so reciprocal is changed to bidirectional because that word has been a point of confusion in the past. The most interesting piece of feedback that they provided, that the staff provided to the AC, is that for all intents and purposes, we have a unidirectional transfer policy now because the preponderance of the addresses that are available for transfer, those being old legacy addresses and addresses that have become on the market, are in fact in the US and in Canada and perhaps to a smaller degree other places in the ARIN region, but the amount of address space transferring in to the ARIN region from RIRs with a bidirectional transfer policy is actually very, very small. Staff, council says they want to make sure that removing reciprocal does not remove compatible and needs-based, and that is legally critical. So we have not yet applied the most recent iteration of staff and legal feedback to the text that is in our wiki or to the text that we are presenting here. We're going to get feedback from the community here at the microphones momentarily and add that in when we make our next iteration of changes, which will of course require one more round of staff and legal review. Microphones, please. Where's your questions at?
Now you're throwing me off. But yes, the microphones are open, and I know it was after lunch, a little slow getting going. take it away.
Matt Petak, Yahoo. Just a tiny question about this. Does the transfer text limit itself to IPv4 transfers only, or is it open for any kind of transfer?
Do you want to answer that?
No, I invited you to the, sorry.
So you caught me unaware, but I think that as a practical matter, V6 transfers are not a thing.
So if you look in NERPM, in section 8, I'm going online instead, hold on.
You drive.
6.
So, NERPM section 8, principles. In the specified transfer policy, it specifies that there's a minimum transfer size for IPv4. It doesn't reference IPv6, but I think it's fairly safe to say that we haven't seen policy from the community that discusses the implications of transfers for V6. 8.3 specifically says IPv4 number resources and ASNs.
To be clear, specify transfers, I believe M&A transfers would probably occur.
Right. We have not had the community discuss IPv6 transfers, so until we've actually had that, we're not interpreting it that way.
Same thing for ASNs in 8.3. You can transfer ASNs, but we'd like to change this so it's based on just the V4 ratio, regardless of the type of resource being transferred.
It can be whichever you want it to be when you clarify the policy text accordingly.
Well, I would request that if we're going to make the ratio based on the IPv4 inventory versus average, that we limit this to just IPv4 number resource transfers.
Certainly one option, or you can make it for all transfers in and out of the region, as the community
I'm
wishes.
talking to the author there on the stage and asking him.
It's Shepherd.
Not the author.
Shepherd.
Yeah, I'm not the author. That is an interesting clarifying point, and we'll take that under advisement. Thank you.
But otherwise, I support it.
Excellent. Thank you for the supportive comment. And we'll go.
One little one. So because this is specific to inter-RIR, and inter-RIR specifies the source has to be the rights holder of the IPv4 block in question. We don't presently have inter-RIR AS transfers under 8.4. There's a theoretical way to accomplish them with a merger and acquisition, but I don't think that that's what this policy is intended to do, so this policy may only be applicable to V4 anyway. Okay.
Thank you. Far microphone, please. Far microphone, please.
Okay, Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. I support the spirit of this policy. All of the suggestions that staff and legal and everything else that's been brought up seems valid. Would love to see the final text, but the whole purpose of this is to be globally fair. And it addresses a real issue, not in our region. This is not about our region, but it's about being globally fair. As the numbers have shown, nothing is really coming back into the region. It's not a big deal in that respect. If there's a major change, that would be dealt with later on. But we need to address this in our side first before some of the other regions that this is of relevance to can make their policy. So I do support it with whatever is written, whatever is needed. Can you just clarify from the first slide in terms of the numbers? If you can just go back to that. Yep. This policy is really addressing LACNIC and AFRINIC, correct? Would it also apply to RIPE and APNIC, or when would it apply to RIPE and APNIC?
I would assume when the numbers suggest.
Yeah, I'm not able to do the math in my head, but
It would.
John Sweeney with ARIN. It would basically take right to lose equivalent of 8/8 to get down to the average.
/8.
Right. And
8/8. The equivalent of that much space would have to leave the ripe region for them to get below. You
And
can
they
do
would all
that.
have to be going to APNIC and,
Well, they could go anywhere.
Right.
Because it's the average. The average will always stay the same.
oh, that's true. We're not making any more, are we?
so
We only wish, right?
I believe that
Yeah.
they're making new ones, but they're not compatible.
It's called V6. Oh, sorry. New point, quickly though.
No, so where I was going with this is, if one of the regions who did not qualify in this policy were to lose 8/8 as an example, then us sending the IPs into their region would be very appropriate at that point as well. So I definitely support the way this has been done.
Thank you. Center microphone.
Owen DeLong, Akamai, ARIN AC. I opposed this policy before we did funny math to try and make it more palatable, and I oppose it even more with the funny math. The reality is that the funny math does not make it any more palatable. It simply does a lot of sleight of hand and kind of an Enron-style gesture to confuse the community. It's the kind of policy authorship that Andy Fastow would be proud of. Restricting it, if you want to restrict it to LACNIC and AFRINIC, do that. Say that in the policy. Coming up with this formula by which for the next 386 years, it's only AFRINIC and LACNIC, unless something changes drastically from the way things are today, is just silliness. It's absurd. It's like constructing special purpose entities. So let's not do that. Let's say what we mean in the policy, and if the community supports that, let's move forward with that. But
you would
let's
not- but you would
avoid
not be-
mathematical sleight of hand as a way to achieve policy goals that we don't want to admit are the policy goals.
But if it was to implement your suggestion just to name the RIRs, would you be supportive or still not?
No, because I think that we should actually implement fair policy, which is bidirectional. The community spent a lot of time discussing whether or not there should be a reciprocity requirement. We said yes, and we put it in, and it's there for a reason.
Notwithstanding the fact that in implementation, we effectively have a unidirectional transfer policy today.
Well, we have a policy which allows and is fair, and the fact that it happens to be in implementation largely unidirectional is not an unexpected circumstance, but if somebody wants to transfer resources in the other direction, they can. Those transfers are occurring, and I think that if anything, if nothing, that fact in and of itself is the best argument that this policy is unnecessary, and LACNIC and AFRINIC need not fear the exodus of addresses from their region towards ARIN.
Okay, thank you. I think we should move on to the next one. Center microphone again. Sorry, John Springer. Do we have any remote participation?
Remote comment. Marla Azinger from Frontier. While I understand the concern, I don't agree with non-reciprocal. I think AFRINIC and LACNIC need to modify their policy to say only address space directly allocated to the registry for dissemination can't be transferred out. But it should not block space not originally from that RIR from being transferred back out.
I'm rapidly losing cues at the mic, so if you'd like to approach, please do so quickly. Paul Wilson, do you need to respond right away or just in queue? Okay, then center microphone again, please.
Hi, Remco van Mook, speaking as a private individual. So I don't have much of an opinion about this policy. However, I'd like to make an observation and have a follow-on question to this community. The current version of the inter-RIR transfer policy, as it stands within ARIN, has certainly informed policy discussion in a number of regions other than this one, resulting in compatible inter-RIR transfer policies. My question is, why would you change that at this point? Don't you think that keeping the policy as it stands actually helps discussion in those other regions? Thank you.
Okay, well, if anybody would like to address that, they're welcome to approach Mike, left far microphone. That's you.
Paul Wilson from APNIC. As you probably know, APNIC has got a system of national internet registries, NIRs, that operate like a regional internet registry at a national level. They have policies which have to be consistent with, but which may vary in non-substantial ways from the regional and global policies. And this is one case where we also have variations. So we have two NIRs that allow transfers in, but not transfers out. And I think that's for the same reasons, I suspect, as you've observed AFRINIC and LACNIC have got a similar situation. So I haven't done the maths, but I think in both those cases we'd find that they had a lower than average IPv4 penetration. So they may well be as deserving at a national level of this policy as you feel the two regions are. So I'd ask you if this policy is going forward in its in further development to implementation, that you might like to or be able to consider this particular case, that there are national internet registries which, for which the same conditions and possibly the same concessions should apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for that. That's wonderful. Middle microphone.
David Huberman, Oracle, ARIN Advisory Council. We have 5 RIRs. We don't have one. We could have one, especially when we're talking about, if we're just going to talk about IPv4, we could totally just have one registry, right? Let's get the numbers where they're not needed to the operators who need them. One RIR could handle that just fine. But we actually have 5 RIRs, and we figured out as an internet community that's actually really useful. It's useful for local cultures, it's useful for local languages, it's useful for local time zones, it's useful for local laws. It's very arrogant to say, this is what we think as Americans, as Canadians, as Jamaicans, as whomever we are here in this region. This is the way everyone in the world should be when it comes to transfers of numbers that they need. There are good reasons that you may or may not agree with, but some people do agree with, why AFRINIC does not want two-way transfers. There are reasons the LACNIC community does not want two-way transfers. And by the way, Owen has asked me to point out, and it's a very good point, neither LACNIC nor AFRINIC have passed any policy, nor have they reached any consensus on any policy on unidirectional or bidirectional policies. These are simply in discussion. Let's get the IP addresses from where they are, which is predominantly in the ARIN region. Talk to the brokers here. Talk to the people who do this every single day. The addresses are here that are for sale. Let us allow them to move where they are to where operators who are doing the same things we are doing, where they need to be.
So Dave, you're supportive of the policy? Just like to get that on the clear. Just checking remote participation quickly. Nope. We're up to date. Far microphone, please.
Yeah, Alandra from ICANN, but speaking on my own capacity. I've been to previous meetings in LACNIC just a couple of weeks ago and to AFRINIC not that long ago, where the unidirectional transfer policies was discussed, and I want to add in the direction that my colleague Huberman was mentioning. There have been some discussions, fairly heated discussion, I should say, but no policy was able to pass in either of those regions. And so somehow interested to see what will happen here.
Okay, thank you for the comment. The microphones are rapidly emptying in queue, so if we don't see someone approach a microphone by the end of the speaker, we will close the microphones. So far microphone, please.
Chris Woodfield, Salesforce, ARIN AC. I got in line, but I think I'll change a lot of my comments to what Dave Huberman said. I have a lot of the same opinions. One thing to point out is that there are, if anyone is concerned about, why hasn't LACNIC or AFRINIC agreed to have an outbound transfer or a reciprocal policy, I wanted to remind everybody that there have been in the past loopholes in the RIR transfer process that have been used in ways not intended. Those loopholes eventually are, right now have been closed. I'm thinking primarily about RIPE's hold time for transfers. So, people can point to that and have a real concern about losing their address space or being used as a conduit in that way.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Far microphone again, please.
Hey, Dmitry Kovmanyuk, into XLC ARIN member. I'm also participating in RIPE Bridge meetings, so there's a quick comment. I think if you treat RIRs as governments and we try to enact laws and try to kind of segment the space, we ultimately would end up just making things harder for people who really need the space, and the ways around it would also be found. Another thing that all this quarterly tactic and the audit policy evaluation can lead to lots of corner cases, which would just be basically bureaucracy that we add. So I think we should not impose our will on other registries' rules and spend resources on evaluating these rules according to this WAG triple conditions to be met as proposed in its policy. So I think it should be either registry agreement with everyone, just like 2 countries can have it to get the analog, or just keep things the way they are and don't try to invent these formulas and have this feedback loop of other policies and other policy, because it just doesn't feel right to me. So I'd oppose this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if, before we go to John, who I can see that, just if you would please start approaching a microphone immediately, as I will be closing the microphones at the end of John's comment.
For that last speaker, were they in favor or opposed?
They said in favor, I thought.
No, you said
In
opposed.
favor? Okay.
Could the gentleman clarify since they're...
No, I don't think this proposal is good.
I'm glad you came
So
up with
opposed.
it. I
Thank
thought I
you.
heard in favor. My apologies.
Great.
Opposed. Thank you. Okay. Microphones are now closed. We will go to our last 2 comments, starting at the middle and then the far.
Owen DeLong, Akamai, ARIN AC. We keep talking as if LACNIC and AFRINIC want a unidirectional policy in this process, and yet the heated discussions that I was present for in both of those RIR meetings, much of the heat came from people who didn't want a unidirectional policy and felt that if there was going to be an inter-RIR transfer policy, it should be bidirectional. So there is no consensus in any region that a unidirectional policy is desirable, and so I do not understand the perceived need to create one or create the allowance for one here at this time.
Okay. I assume still opposed. Final comment from the far microphone.
Jason Schiller, Google, ASOAC, opposed. I don't think the mathematics in this policy makes a lot of sense. It looks like hand waving, and specifically the comments that we heard from Paul Wilson about the situation with a number of NIRs. I know for my company, if we wanted to be able to leverage a policy like this, the place where we'd likely do it would be actually in the APNIC region, to be honest. My concern, however, is the possibility that we could get addresses wedged somewhere. If I imagine we take some of our inventory of addresses and move them into a country where we think we want to do business, and then it turns out that our business needs change, we might not be able to get those addresses back out of that NIR and use them in other places easily. And that seems problematic to me, because now I've taken addresses that have a certain dollar value associated with them, put them in a place where they're not useful to me, in a place where if there's not need, they're not valuable anymore, and have to go to the market to replace them at a much higher price. So it seems to me that the people that advocate supporting this policy want the free flow of addresses, and the people that are opposed to this policy want the free flow of addresses. And this seems to be an untenable position to have. My advice going forward with this is take the math out, or if you want to have useful math, you should have it based on what's available in that locale. Because just based on the holdings, I don't think it makes sense. It's really a measure of need that I think you're trying to get at.
Okay, and thank you for that final comment. We have one final remote participant.
Just a comment myself. On this slide, I think you can lose the millions and billions because the numbers speak for themselves.
Okay. Thank you for suggestion. Anything? Nothing further. Okay. Thank Rob for the presentation. We do not have a poll on this one, but I would encourage you to find the Shepherds, Rob Seastrom and Joe Provo, or your local AC member at the break or the social if you have comments or feedback on that. John.